Welcome back to another episode of Sophia the 380 SL. We're still talking about air conditioning. You guys saw some videos that I had posted, part 1 and part 2 of fixing my air conditioning here on Sophia the 380 SL. It's been about 4 weeks now. It's still blowing really cold, which is great. I didn't want to miss out on a couple presentations that Vic had put on, so this is what this video is about. He's going to go over 2 presentations. One is about charging procedures and one is about gauge diagnostics. They're pretty technical. I don't full on get everything he's talking about, but I probably have to watch it a few more times for me to full on understand. But if you follow along with part 1 and part 2 and this video, you should be able to get a full understanding of the AC system and how it's going and how to diagnose it, how to charge it, things like that. So I wanted to share the information that Vic had given to me and want to share that with the rest of you. So hope you enjoy these 2 presentations by Vic. Thanks.
So we're going to go over automotive air conditioning charging procedures, because right now, since we last met, we've determined that you're going to need some new O-rings. We're going to go out to the car and put new O-rings on. We're going to put a vacuum on it after we put the O-rings on, and then if it holds a vacuum, then we're going to go through these charging procedures. So, okay, we're going to do initial inspection before we do any of that. We don't want to spin our wheels here. Before the charging, before we do any charging, we're going to make sure the belts are in good condition, particularly these belts. A lot of people who own these cars, they haven't changed the belts in a while. V-belts tend to stretch, crack, and slip. So we need to make sure that we check our Mercedes belts. Check compressor, condition of the clutch pulley, and the electrical connection. Make sure none of the wires are brittle and broken. And then the pressure switches, just like you saw in the previous video, where Fred showed you how to check that. Fred showed you how to check the compressor by jumping with the wire and make sure the clutch goes on and off. Okay, we're gonna once we do that, we'll install the manifold gauges. Now this is going to be quick, down and dirty, because it's all self-explanatory, but some people have never dealt with this, so I want to make sure that we present it in a way that you'll understand. Okay, we're going to place the red on the high pressure side and the blue, which is misspelled here, but the blue fitting on the low pressure side. Now, you'll probably ask, well, how will I know? They'll only fit on each fitting. Like the high pressure won't fit on the low pressure. It'll only fit on the high pressure, and vice versa. The yellow hose, there's yellow hose, there's 3 hoses. If you look at the gauges, there's red, blue, and yellow. The yellow hose is the vacuum hose and also the fill hose. You'll connect it to a vacuum pump if you're evacuating the system, or to the Freon tank if you're charging the system. So this is what we're going to go out and do once we change those O-rings. We're going to evacuate the system. Just like we said, we're going to put the red hose on, and then we're for vacuuming, we're going to open up the little hose on top, and I'll show you when we get out there. And we'll open up the little hoses on top. We'll open up the manifold on the gauge set, and we'll turn on the vacuum, so we'll get all that vacuumed out. Process will take about 45 minutes, and just like we mentioned last time, the relationship between pressure and temperature, right? When pressure increases, temperature increases, and that pressure could be positive pressure or negative pressure. And this time, because we're vacuuming, we'll do negative pressure, and that's going to boil all of the water or moisture that's in the system out. So just a quick chart showing, like, we're going to hold it at 27.32 inches of mercury, and the boiling point of water is 110. At higher vacuums, you'll see like Fahrenheit at 29.66. It's 50 degrees Fahrenheit, water will boil. So again, the higher the pressure, the higher the temperature. Okay. We're going to, when we get around to introducing the R134 into the system, what we have to do is we've got to make sure that there's no air in the system. We don't want to introduce any air in the system that we just evacuated. So we'll put the yellow hose on, connect the yellow hose for each tank to the Freon tank. Slightly loosen the top thread, or if you have, like I have, a little Schrader valve on top, you'll push that, and then you'll see Freon coming out. When you see Freon coming out of the Schrader valve or the hose, make sure you wear gloves when you do that. Tighten it up. That way you'll make sure that hose is all filled with Freon and no air. Tighten the threads, turn off the tank. Okay, charging the system. Now, I got to tell you this is very important. The high pressure side valve must remain closed. That's a high pressure side valve that is on the manifold gauge set. That has to stay closed. You can leave the little one on the screw on the bottom on, and I'll point it out to you. That way you could read the pressure, but the manifold gauge knob has to stay closed so it doesn't mix with the low side. Okay, I'm going to go ahead to the next one, because we should do this, and this is what we're going to do, and we'll come back to that other slide. We're going to charge with a scale. You may ask, well, how do we know how much to put in? Well, Mercedes-Benz has a set amount of Freon that you put in, and it's measured in pounds for the U.S. market, or kilograms for the European market. So, well, how do we determine that? Well, you have to determine that using a scale. There's another way to do it. We'll get that into in another couple slides, but you have to determine that using a scale. So we're going to also use a scale. We're going to weigh the tank on the scale, record the weight, and then we're going to take whatever poundage and minus that. Say, like, if it's the tank weighs 18 pounds and the charge is 2 pounds. So when you look at the scale and the scale reads now the bottle weighs 16 pounds, you're done. But, and I want to add this little caveat. Mercedes says charge 2.18 pounds of R12. Okay, but since for 134, you have to put in 15.3% less. Now, you can look at me and obviously tell I'm no math major, but Google is, so I figured it out for us. We're going to charge 1.84 pounds of R134. Okay, so that's 1.8 pounds is 15.3% less of 2.18. Yeah, thank you, Google. Okay, so that's what we'll do. We watch the scale numbers drop, and you'll see it. We'll introduce the scale, and you can see it'll make sense. Now, here's a lot of you guys that you're charging without a scale. Okay, before I say this, I want to make sure that you understand the ambient temperature, or the outside temperature, has a ton to do with your pressures. Not how much you put in, but what your pressure gauges will read, okay? So, charging without it, usually some of you guys get those little cans and they have the little scale on it. If you don't, or if you have a gauge, low pressure gauge when it's reading between 25 and 40 psi, and when the high side reads 220 to 250, the system's charged. And these numbers are, again, all dependent on the ambient temperature. At 25, it'll probably be about 72 outside. At 40, you'll be closer to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Same with that. Okay, higher ambient temperatures will affect the high side temperatures. Again, I can't stress this enough. If it's very hot outside, your numbers are going to increase. And the good thing, and here's why I use mechanical gauges, because the needles on both sides of the gauges will be in relatively the same position. They won't read the same numbers. They'll just be in relatively the same position. Like this one, it's at the 11 o'clock position on the low side. The high one will be at 11 o'clock position on the high side. Okay. All right, so we've been out to the car. We did everything we said we're going to do. And this is for you guys who are looking at this going, you're not getting cold air. Even though you did all this stuff, what's going on? So you could take a look at these gauges, and this is the low side and this is the high side. You could take a look at the gauges, and I'm going to show you how to look at the gauges and determine what's wrong or what's going on, why you're not getting cold air. Okay? So this one, both sides are lower than normal. Okay? Remember I said in the last video that the needles will be relatively the same, right, when it's properly charged. And what this indicates is the system is low on refrigerator and is undercharged. Why? Maybe you still got a leak somewhere. Maybe you put the right amount in, or maybe you didn't put enough in. Okay? Okay. Both sides, both readings are higher than normal. If both low and high side readings are too high, it indicates you put too much in. And a lot of people, DIYers, you tend to overcharge because you think if a little is good, a lot is better. It's not. It's really not. Okay? It also can be that the condenser fan isn't working. Make sure your fan's turned on. Remember we said that when you blow air across it, right, it performs cooling. So if you got no air across it, the pressure, the temperature rises, the pressure's going to rise. So that's what make these too high, because you got too much pressure. Or your car's transferring. This is very possible in Southern California, Nevada, a lot of places where it's really hot. You're transferring heat from the radiator to the condenser. So how do you fix that? Well, you need to get some compressed air or a gentle water hose and wash off your radiator, the fins on your radiator and the fins on your condenser, so you have free flow of air. Usually, the condenser's in the front, and that's the one you gather bugs on. So it gets, you're building like a wall, an insulator right there of dead bugs or road debris or whatever. You need to make sure there's airflow going all the way through there. This is a sad one because I've had that happen. The low side goes into a vacuum and the high side is too high. This happens when you have a blocked expansion valve like we have in our R107s, and in Mercedes, the older Mercedes, we have an expansion valve. Or if you have like a Ford, they have an orifice tube. If those things are blocked or plugged or not functioning, you'll see that the low side gets pulled into a vacuum, and this side just is taking it all. Sometimes this will happen if your compressor breaks down from the inside out, and you'll have shards of metal or whatever happened go through the lines. That's the time where you have to remove and replace the compressor, and I would suggest that you get new lines, because as much as you flush that, there'll always be little metal parts. So if your compressor grenades, get a new one and get some lines. Okay, now low side is too high, the high side is too low. That's a sign of a bad compressor. Okay, when a compressor clutch is engaged, you'll hear it engage, you'll see it. It looks like it should be working. You should be blowing ice cubes out of your vents, but you're not. It's failing. It's like a car with bad rings. You get no compression, so you're not getting any pressure. Any compression to your R134. So sometimes you can fix it with something simple like tightening your belts. If your belts are squealing and chirping and it looks like this, try tightening your belts first. Don't condemn it right away. But if you do that and you've tried to introduce the right amount in there and it looks like this, you're going to need a compressor. Okay, we're just going to go real quick over some electrical troubleshooting. Okay, our cars are old. We love them like our children, but the reality of this is they're old, and all the wires are old. Those wires have been baking under that hood for 40, 50 years, depending on how old your car is, okay? So make sure that those wires are still connected and they're secure. Check all your AC fuses. Test your pressure switches. Here's how do you do the pressure switches from the high side and the low side too. Those switches, when they're not activated, should all read continuity. So put it on the little thing on your multimeter that makes the sound beep, right? You should read continuity on all those. And this is just exactly what I read about it. So yeah, really quick, really easy. And now we're going to go out and we're going to put this into practice.